We're going on to verse 7 here. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace, in the beginning of verse 8, that he lavished on us. So, let's start at the start here. In him, we're talking about Jesus, obviously. It's the sentence before reveals that he's talking about Jesus, Christ. In him we have redemption. It's important to understand there is no redemption with God apart from Jesus. It's him alone. It's what he accomplished at the cross. We can't get in any other way. There's no way. It's like that great book written by John Bunyan in the 1600s of Pilgrim's Progress. And there was only one way, and it was via the cross, and that's it. There's no jumping the fence later on. There's no getting in, and people who try, they don't. You can't get the redemption of God without Jesus. There's no other person in all of history who could possibly take that role, and so it's always important to remember that it's in Jesus. So in Jesus we have redemption. Now, what is redemption? I mean, we can. Sometimes that word is kind of used in some places. It's often, I think it's often used in terms of thinking about something being taken back and restored and renewed. Old Testament times, there's a couple of times where it talks about redemption or being redeemed. Not a couple of times, numerous times. And that's in reference to something being bought back or bought off something, to like in slavery, being bought out of slavery. Or in the case of Ruth, you see that there's a kinsman redeemer. There's Boaz, who's a kinsman redeemer, and he redeems the family situation for Ruth and Naomi there. And Ruth becomes his responsibility. It's taking, well, in that case, he was taking ownership of Ruth and the care of Ruth in that situation. Great picture is in Exodus. We have the story of the Israelites who'd been enslaved by the Egyptians, and them getting out of Egypt was the nation of Israel being redeemed by God. So in that situation, the slavery, it's not, the slavery in Egypt was not like just a nice job that they did and they just worked making bricks and they were brickies or anything like that. They were slaves, so they were oppressed, they were treated terribly, they were not regarded as important other than to get the tasks done. So if it meant that some people had to die, well, whatever. Slaves who weren't behaving well, they would be treated, you understand. For them to be redeemed, it's taken out of that horrible situation of slavery and brought into a freedom that they didn't know before. And so the process of them being redeemed, however, one fundamental thing was this thing that God told Moses to instruct the people to participate in, and that was what was then called the Passover. And so in that situation, you have the Israelites, they would get a lamb, they sacrificed the lamb, they put the blood on the doorposts, and that was an act that meant that death passed over them. And it was after that then they were released and they were redeemed. Hebrews 9:22, it tells us that without the shedding of blood, there's no forgiveness of sins. All from the very beginning, even when Adam and Eve sinned against God, they chose to rebel against God. God sacrificed animals in order for them to have animal clothing, and so right from the beginning, it was set in through the wisdom and understanding of God that the punishment for death, as we see, the punishment for sin, as we see in Romans chapter 3, the wages of sin is death. 6:23. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death. There has to be shedding of blood to pay for sin. And so, this is the amazing story of the gospel, obviously, is that we get redeemed. We're slaves to our sin, but we get redeemed by the blood that Jesus shed. It's through his blood, as it says, in him, in Christ, we have redemption through his blood. It's through his shedding of his blood that we get brought out of the slavery of sin and brought into his kingdom, which is just extraordinary. And so it says there, the forgiveness of sins. We have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sin. So all of our sin gets washed clean, which is just amazing. Everything that we've done wrong. And it's not just, you've got to understand that sin isn't just the acts that we do that we notice are not good. It's a whole framework of living that says, I'm the boss, don't tell me what to do. And you might say, oh, I'll listen to this, I'll listen to a bit of that, but it's you being, I guess, in a mind space, a heart space of, I don't want God ruling my life. And so it may not even, you might not even see these outward acts constantly. It could just be an interior of self-promotion and self-glorification, self-justification, and people might look on and go, oh wow, you've got a really good life, because you might think, I'm going to do these things, but if it's excluding God from your life, that's the essence of sin. It's a rebellion, it's a choosing to take the place of God. And so this forgiveness of sin, that we've been redeemed out of this place of sin, and forgiveness, washing us clean from all of that. It's not that we get it perfect anymore. I mean, from now on, it's not that we're never going to stumble. But the slavery aspect has been paid for. And so the whole concept beforehand of adoption to sonship is very much a reality in the way that we respond to life, where once we had to fight to make life work for ourselves, but now that we're adopted into the family, we've got to learn to trust God. We've got to learn to listen to him, to trust what he's saying, and to let go of stuff that we might be holding on to that we need to let go of. And there's a process that takes place as we come to understand that he's such a good dad. But we have been forgiven, despite the fact that we may still stumble on a few things, or more than a few things, but we're in a process of being renewed and conformed to the likeness of Jesus, as it tells us in Romans 8. Despite the fact that there's still a journey going on, we've been forgiven. And that's so good, that redemption has already taken place. It's not taking place, it has taken place. You have been redeemed, which is amazing. But here's the cool thing. It's in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he has lavished on us. So as we said, grace meaning unmerited favour. It's in accordance. Our forgiveness and our redemption is in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he's lavished on us. So the thing that grabs me there is the fact that it's not in accordance, or to the measure of, is how I think of it, to the measure of his grace is his forgiveness is just enough just to cover what I've done. No, the forgiveness and the redemption that has been bought for us is in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he's lavished on us. So God's grace, his unmerited favour, is immeasurable. And he has lavished that grace on us. And I love that word is chosen there, that it's lavish. That's what it is. It's not skimpy. He's not skimping out on his favour. It's not like he's got his book on how much favour he's given out, and he's like, oh gee, where's the accountant? I need to check to see if I've got any more unmerited favour left for these people. Maybe I'll just give them a little sprinkling. No, it's like dumping of a massive amount of grace. It's just lavish. He's lavished it on us, which is amazing. So there's never a point where our sin is too big, because the lavish nature of his grace is overwhelming and abundant, just an overabundance, a superabundance of love and grace. There's never a point where it's like, darn it, child, you've crossed the line now and I just cannot forgive you for that one. It's just, you're like in this ocean of, like this massively deep ocean of his grace, but like it says in that song, he loves us. It's like we're all sinking, we're completely surrounded, and there's no amount of us doing anything in the vastness of this love that could ever supersede it. And this is the good news, that in him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins in accordance with the riches of God's grace that he's lavished on us. That is good. Verse 7. That's good. Memorize it. Woo, it's a good one.